It is just a huge honor to be in the podcast studio with Karl Frye. He's the principal of Frye Practice Sales and Healthcare Real Estate. He's the founder and principal owner. He oversees all aspects of sales, mergers and acquisitions, and commercial real estate needs of his clients. Karl created FPS for Frye Practice Sales after a 10-plus year career in commercial healthcare banking. He has successfully worked on hundreds of practice-related projects in the all medical verticals with a heavy focus on dental and veterinary practice acquisitions. Karl has worked on a single docs project to expansion projects with 85 plus doctors looking to build and expand ASCs throughout the United States. Karl came to Arizona with his family in 2013 after a decade plus of healthcare banking in Southern California when he was promoted to oversee the state of Arizona for Wells Fargo Practice Finance. Karl then moved on to Arizona Business Bank, where his focus was providing financing for large group practice growth, ambulatory surgery centers, senior living projects. Karl started Arizona Practice Finance in 2015 as he saw the need to help educate physicians and dentists on what lending options they truly had in the marketplace that grew into the Frye Practice Sales, as he saw too many doctors being taken advantage of or short selling their equity and goodwill that they had spent their lifetime to build. Karl lives in Scottsdale with his wife and 2 daughters, and when he's not coaching his daughter's sports teams or doing something as a dad, he enjoys golfing, watching college and professional sports, and making different meals on his smoker for his family and friends to enjoy. My youngest boy, Zach, just bought a smoker.
Okay.
He loves to
What
smoke.
kind? That's the key.
I don't know. But
There's different camps and different types of smoker as far as
it's funny because when they were little, I gave them a menu because my mom made us take piano lessons. You had to join Boy Scouts, blah, blah, blah. But so what I did, I told them they could either, so I found teachers like piano lessons, computer programming, a chef, and they all picked the computer programmings and the chefs and the wrestling.
Okay.
So my garage was a wrestling mat for 15 years. And, but 2 of my sons, they're chefs. We had this lady, and she was, I mean, and you would think of her as a pro chef.
Sure.
And she just, oh my God, she totally changed the life of 2 of my boys. They can just cook anything. But I'm going to start with the question I shouldn't start because it's the one you probably get bombed with all the time. Should I own my building or rent? You talked to the founder of Pizza Hut, Dan Carney, who I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. He was up the street. He was in the same church. He made a religion availability. Any of us dumb kids could go into the headquarters of Pizza Hut and go into Dan's office to ask him a business question. And he hated real estate. He didn't want anything to do with it. He just thought, he'd do anything to not own the real estate. Then there was Sam Walton, right up the street on the in Bentonville, who one of his earliest properties, the landlord, almost put him into bankruptcy because they weren't going to renew his lease because the landlord decided he was going to start a mart.
Okay.
And Sam Walton almost went under, and him and Helen decided, I will never rent again. I want to be the owner of my deal. So I'm sure you get all the ass all the time. They graduate, they're 25, they're going to practice till they're 65. Do you want to be a renter for 40 years, or do you want to own the land and building?
It really depends on what their goal is, but obviously it's going to make more fiscal sense for you to own your own real estate versus paying a lease every month, and then annually you're going to have increases on top of that. So I wouldn't say it's cut and dry, the answer as it should be this or should be this. I mean, you also have many different areas. You have a standalone building or office space in Ohio versus a lot of times dentists want to go into retail strip. And the likelihood of them being able to buy a retail strip center, it's probably just not going to happen because most of them are owned by a REIT out of LA or New York or somewhere.
Explain REIT for the kids.
Real estate investment trust. So a large group that owns properties, and then they have their investors come in, and that's how the investors buy in, is they have little small pieces of this trust that owns all these shopping centers throughout the nation. And so in that case, you're dealing with a property manager or a management person sitting in a different office who really isn't going to be, down the street, someone you can talk to, and it's really just a business decision when you're talking with them about your leasing, your rates, your tenant improvement allowance, your free rent that you're getting, all those items are huge as far as setting you up for success when it comes to a lease. Now, if you own your own real estate, that's great because after a certain time frame and being in the lending arena for so long, there's multiple ways you can do it. You can do it through traditional conventional financing. You could do it through SBA financing. There's different routes to go just based on how quickly you want to pay it off and how much you want to put down. And all those items come into play and definitely factor into what's going to be the best fiscal decision. Also, if you can only purchase 1,800 square feet to start, but you want to have at some point a 10-op practice, well, getting 10 ops into 1,800 square feet, that'd be interesting to see. So it really just depends on your growth plans and your parameters and what you want to do. But I know a lot of there's benefits to owning your own real estate. That's for darn sure. So definitely things that I think if you can own your own real estate and aspire to that and get to that point, then great, go for it. But if you want to be in retail strip or kind of have that, retail frontage or frontage at a front of a busy intersection in a downtown area, it's going to cost you a pretty penny and it might not even be available. So I guess a long-winded answer for that, but.
Is there different, and the old saying, my dad used to always say, the easiest dollar earned is $1 in expenses saved. The second easiest dollar earned is $1 taxes delayed. The hardest damn dollar you'll ever earn is doing another dollar of your trade,
Sure.
So his first question, it would be, is there any tax advantages of me owning versus leasing?
Yeah. I mean, definitely you're going to have, and that's why it's good. I'm not a CPA and I don't play one on television. So I want to give out that disclaimer before I answer the question. But yeah, there's definitely some benefits to having it. There's a lot of different ways you can write off. You can really pick and choose your rent at that point. If you're your tenant, obviously you want to charge market rents, but sometimes you can find ways to make that a little more beneficial to you at the end of the year when it comes to how much you're taking home and how much Uncle Sam is going to charge you based on your actual net income. So there's definitely benefits, and that's why I always say whenever I'm talking to someone who's looking at buying or someone who's looking at coming out of school, a new dentist, surround yourself with a good team, and that's someone, practice broker like myself, someone who does commercial real estate, who focuses on the dental space, and then a dental-focused attorney, a dental-focused CPA. All those individuals are paramount to success. It's having a good team. I think it's just like any sport, just like anything that you do in business. You want to have a good team surrounding you.
You've been in dentistry a long time.
Yeah.
How long you been in dentistry, or in this space?
In this space, I've kind of been on both sides of the coin, which is nice, from financing the dental acquisitions to being a transition broker. So overall, decade plus now. So
that's what I'm trying to get at. How has the private equity and DSO changed the whole dental space in the last decade that you've been in here?
Quite a bit. I mean, I think I've seen that escalate over the past 5 to 7 years more so than any time prior. I know DSOs have been around in some capacity since the mid to late 80s, but not to what we're seeing today. I think based on numbers that I saw a month or so ago, I think that a DSO percentage of ownership is right around 22%, 24% in the marketplace now.
For Arizona?
No, for nationwide, I thought.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, it depends on, there's a lot of...
I hear 12% of facilities. Stan Bergman at Shine says it's 18% of supplies. So somewhere around those numbers.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you got to think too, it's like there's such a changing, I guess that title of DSO, from emerging DSO to you have 6 to 10 practices, or you have 10 plus. And so, but it's definitely a growing piece of the marketplace. And Arizona is one of the states that makes it easier for that to occur, just because, I mean, I could go and I'm not a dentist, but I could go and buy a practice with ease based on how the state allows that to occur. And so,
is that rare? Or I mean, like out of 50 states, is that very common?
I believe there's about 6 to 8 states, 6 right now, that really make it super easy for me and some guy off the street can go buy a practice. So, but that's not an all. And and it's possible in most every state. It's just the amount of red tape and paperwork that you have to go through, setting up different PCs and certain corporations to, move through that, what the state is going to require you to own a practice as a dentist or a non-dentist. But yeah, definitely it's a very active market, and there's new DSOs coming into the market daily. I get calls all the time about, hey, we want to acquire. Just yesterday, I got a call from a quote unquote DSO out of this one was out of California, saying that, all right, we want to come in, we want to buy all the great practices. And so I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit about you guys. And like, well, we have a lot of money and we want to spend it. Okay, that's great. What's your plan? Like, well, we're going to be great. We're going to do these great things. I'm like, okay, well, how many practices do you have now? They're like, well, we're working on our first. I'm like, okay. I I think the idea of DSO sounds great in theory, but I don't know that it's ultimately going to be successful for everybody trying to do it. And I think you're seeing that.
Well, I can tell you this from 30 years that, I've lived through 4 contractions.
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 1980. That was the worst I ever seen. 21% interest rates. The Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker had to be driven around by bodyguards. So many people wanted to kill the guy. Then the graduated 87 in May, and October was Black Monday. The market fell a quarter in one day. Sure. Yesterday, the market fell 1%. You would have thought, hide your wallet. Well, I lived through when it fell a quarter in one day. And then the Y2K popped in March of 2000. Then the Lehman's Day 10 years ago. And I smell it again.
Yeah.
And you can't predict it because no one knows. No. But you see Warren Buffett sitting on $140 billion in cash. But the one thing I've noticed is that looking back, as the market started topping, I'd start getting interrupted at work saying, oh, there's a guy on line 3 that needs to talk to you. And it'd be some broker, some commodities trader in Chicago. And I instantly realized that I represented dumb money. So when you can't find anybody intelligent to buy, these brokers start calling physicians, dentists, lawyers. You think, well, they got a big 401k. They could buy some. And I'm listening to these sales pitches. And you talk about these guys that are wanting to buy their first dental office. When you think the market is way oversold, and then you look at dentistry and you see that they have 65% overhead, whereas the S&P 500 runs a 5% profit margin for the whole 500. And then you look at the margins in dentistry, so they just think it's easy money.
Yeah.
Easy money.
It's a very low risk. I mean, if you look at the failure rate of dentists, it's at the very most, I think, depending upon you're at maybe a 0.025%. I mean, it's a pretty good bet. I mean, if you're going to bet on a horse, it's a pretty good one to look at.
Yeah, and the only way they lose, it's always they have to lose their license. It's always drugs or alcohol, and even that, I've seen that for 32 years. When the feds knock on your door, if you start lying to them, you're going to go sit in a cage. But if you just sit there and say, busted, man, for some reason, I can't quit eating Vicodin, they're like, don't worry about it. And they take you to the deal, and they have a program, and you peanut. So even that is solvable. I mean, those dentists that go bankrupt from addiction, even they could have responded to their intervention and saved their practice. They just chose, no, I'm just not going to quit doing whatever. And it's about 80% alcohol, 15% Vicodin, 5% everything else. And by everything else, I mean what's in my backpack down here. So are you doing mostly transitions, office sales, purchasing, leasing? What is your hamburger frying a Coke?
Yeah, no, definitely the office transitions. That's where I focus. There's always going to be, I guess I can't say always, but I would say 99% of the time there's going to be a real estate component with the sale of a practice.
99% of the time someone sells their dental office, there's real estate associated.
Well, there's going to be a lease or something in there that needs to be restructured. And especially if they're getting money from a lender, the lender's going to need a lease put in place as well too. So,
well, the first thing you have 2 daughters. How old are your daughters?
6 and 8.
Okay, well, my daughters are in dental school, and they didn't get a DDS degree, doctor in dental surgery. They got a DOE degree, doctor of everything.
Okay.
and they come out and they sign 5-year leases without anyone looking at
Yeah.
it. They go get an associate contract, but they didn't need a lawyer because come on, they know algebra and trig and geometry.
Sure.
So put your dad hat on and tell these young girls what can go wrong when you sign 5-year leases without having someone in the biz. And then the next level up, which I think they did great, but they picked their lawyer because it was their dad's brother, their
Sure.
uncle. The pastor at church recommended him. Oh, yeah, okay, so he's a good man, but has he done dentistry for 10 years?
Yeah, and that's why I kind of go back to what I said earlier: is you surround yourself with a good team. I mean, that's the reason that you're going to hire those people or bring in somebody who has that experience, because the leases have escalation pieces in them. They have, there's different ways to get tenant improvement allowance. There's different ways to get free rent. There's different ways to get all these things that set you up for success, as opposed to you just going in there and saying, hey, this guy seemed really nice, and so he slid a piece of paper across and I signed it. Well, hopefully you've got everything set up. You got your financing set up. You got your business set up. You got your licensing set up and your insurance set up too, because regardless if you do or if you don't, you just signed a lease and that's now in effect. And so if you don't have all these items set up prior, the lease is going to still be there and they're going to still come back and say, all right, it's been 30 days. Where's my rent? Well, you haven't even built out the practice yet. I mean, there's a lot that needs to get done before you can just go in there and set up shop and expect patients to come through your door. So you need to have somebody who's making sure that your legal docs are set up, and that's an attorney. You're gonna need a.
And what kind of attorney would you recommend? Like so you got 2 dental schools here. You got Midwestern in Glendale, and you got AT Still. From your decade plus experiences, how long after graduation are they become in the market to buy a practice on average, would you say?
Lately it's been, I would say 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years.
Yeah, they start. That's when they start getting, getting squirrely.
Getting squirrely.
Yeah, like I want to go out and do this.
And who is in their team that you think they need? You said attorney. What kind of attorney?
Just someone who, and it doesn't take a lot of, you could give me a call, you can give you a call, and we can throw out 2 or 3 names, because it's going to be a handful of names that come up that you see that are speaking at events that I'm doing or you're doing, or that you bump into at a dental show, whatever the case may be. There's going to be a handful of individuals that are stalwarts in the industry.
But tell me if you agree with this. Like in 1900, healthcare was 1% of the GDP, and there were no specialties. At the end of the century, healthcare was 14% of the GDP, and the MDs had 58 specialties, and dentistry had 9. Now dentistry is up to 10. Would you say that their attorney has to be specialized in dentistry?
I would recommend it.
Yeah,
I'd highly recommend.
I think it's everything. Same with your CPA.
Yeah. There's different nuances.
When I meet a dentist and their CPA only does dentistry, they are at a different level of understanding their business.
Yeah, and it's same thing. There's, 90,000 real estate agents out there. Could they do a transaction? Sure. But would you want someone who can only do an apartment lease doing your 10-year dental lease, or 5-year or 7-year, whatever it is?
Because you see these little nuances.
Yeah, and you see pieces. There's different items within a lease that are going to contractually keep you there or keep your name on the lease when you sell the business, possibly. But if you have someone in there going ahead of time and preemptively saying, okay, let's put this in place so in case you do sell before this is up, you can transfer the lease. There's different ways to make it just easier within that succession plan, and having that exit strategy and having those discussions with that team of attorneys, brokerage, bankers, so you know how you can navigate through different points of your career, be it growth, be it exit. All those items are paramount to success. And so that's why I keep on going back to having the team around you and people who understand dentistry, because when my clients ask me for a name, I'll give them 2 or 3 and I'll say, hey, here's the best in the business. Interview them, talk to them, see who you like. You don't have to work with everybody, but feel them out. Figure out who you like and who you gel with and who you want to talk with for hours about CPA related questions.
Now, when they're in school, they have these romantic thoughts that, oh, I'm gonna do this with my best buddy. I mean, Sheila holds my hair when I throw up in the toilet. I'm gonna do this with my best buddy. Is that a good idea?
I don't think it's cut or dry that is or that isn't. But I think it's something that you definitely want to get on the same page as far as what that 5 and 10 year plan and even longer looks like, because at some point, maybe you or maybe your business partner isn't going to no longer want to do the clinical side or do the business side. And when that comes about, there's going to be a split. And so talk about that ahead of time, and just make sure you're on the same page. I mean, there's great partnerships out there. There's bad ones. I think
Do
it
you
really.
see more good or bad?
I see less partnerships than solo docs, and I don't know if that's because that partnerships aren't good per se, but I think it's just more usual that a single doc's going out and going into the market on his or her own, and starting their practice that way. And I think sometimes it's my little pet kind of the mentality. Like, I want to do this on my own and I don't want to share. And sometimes it's,
Not to get too personal with you,
Yeah.
but did you get a prenuptial agreement when you got married?
no.
See, it's the same language as that. Is you're not going to do it when you get married, even though you should. Everybody knows you should, but it's hard to bring up a prenuptial when you're romantically involved. But you shouldn't be romantically involved with your dentist partner. So the deal is with the dentist partner is you have to have an exit strategy. So if you're going to go form a partnership and go start an office with your best friend Karen, that's great. But the lawyer needs to say, okay, if and when this goes south, here's how we're going to value the deal, and here's how we get out.
Sure.
So and remember, what the judge is going to say is she's going to say, I'm just here to enforce contract law. I can't negotiate this for you. And you see it a lot of times in dentistry, like they say, well, if you leave my office, you can't practice within 5 miles of me for 3 years. Okay, then he leaves your office and he sets up across the street, and you go to court, and the judge says, well, you just said he couldn't. You didn't say what was going to happen. You didn't agree to a punishment, and I'm not going to sit here on the bench. All I can do is throw out the entire contract or uphold it. And, but if you said, if you violate this deal, you will write me a check for $100,000, then the judge will enforce that, because as long as you two agree to something that isn't illegal, they'll enforce it. That's contract law. And the other thing about free enterprise that's so disconnected from politics is, in politics, you have all this romance about democracy, but free enterprise is just ran by dictators. And there's nothing more enjoyable than to go in your office and be your dictator and say, no, I don't want to buy a CERAC machine. I want to buy a CBCT. And where I see a lot of divisions is one dentist wants to go to low volume, high fee, and the other one wants to go to low fee, high volume PPO. So one wants to go to Scottsdale and be the cosmetic guru dentist. The other one's like, that's a tough market. I want to sign up for Delta and do a bunch of PPO volume dentistry. And so I don't care what you do, just think about the worst case scenario. If you can live with your worst case scenario, and that's what somebody that's only done dentistry for a decade is going to do. They're going to say, okay, you guys are best friends now, but someday you might hate each other. And when that goes south, where's your exit strategy? And sorry to interrupt, but I want to get that little piece.
That's that.
Because I see the other side. So when you're looking at transitions, they're usually 1 or 2 years out. What percent of them involve land and building versus leases?
I would say predominantly lease where we're at today. I know a lot of doctors are looking for that standalone real estate. It's just not too common here in the valley. It's more common that they're going into a.
But you came from California.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen some real estate volatility.
Oh, yeah.
In your lifetime.
Here,
I've read metrics that the because of Amazon and online shopping that if what you sell can be shipped in a box, it's killing you.
Sure.
That retail is being taken over by where you need a human component, to make a sandwich, to cut your hair, to fix your teeth. Do you think as if online Amazon-like purchases doubled in the next 10 years, that would make a significant amount of commercial real estate on the market of people
I
having
don't
to
think
walk
from
away?
a dental perspective. I think that people are always going to want to go in and physically.
Right, but will they have more real estate? Will their real estate be not as good of a long-term hold? I mean, just because commercial real estate was great in the last 30
Mhm.
years, if half of that's going to move to Amazon, could commercial real estate not be as favorable moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think from one perspective, but also be more affordable if you're going into an industry like you're saying that needs that hands-on effect. So it could be better for a dentist to have that. Well, what used to be there is no longer there, so now they can expand their practice, and maybe the lease rates aren't as high because there's not as many businesses going into the large footprint. I mean, you see a lot of large, what used to be Albertsons and large grocery chains that are now empty, and they're becoming ASC surgery centers, and they're becoming dialysis centers, and they're becoming salon suites. And so it's all these large things that would never fail, or not necessarily fail, but would never go away. But they're going away because of you're getting Amazon shipping your groceries to your door, or Costco's shipping to your door.
And I just want to make one more thing on my last point about the scenario was two girls, best friends in school, and they want to do their practice together. I mean, I open up, Dental Town has 50 forms, and one of them is practice transitions. It's one of the busiest firms. And what's the first thread? Potential buyout of my father's practice. First time poster, blah, blah. But it's kind of like embezzling. Like, in watching people find out they got embezzled, it wasn't the fact that it was 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000. It was the fact that I trusted her, and she was my daughter's godmother at First Communion or whatever. It's the violation. And if you think they don't get prenuptial agreements with their best friend, they don't get them with their spouse, some of the most biggest emotional turmoil I've ever seen is with family. I know dentists, and I know a lot of dentists where they come out of school, they work with their dad's, I'm going to sell you the practice. But after 2 years, nothing happened. 5 years, nothing happened. After 10 years, his dad told him blah, 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 blah. And so then he left after 10, hasn't spoken to his father one time in the next 10. What advice would you give when you only wanted to be a dentist so you could be like your mom, and now you're practicing with your mom, and everything's just on a vague handshake, and you got other siblings? I mean, like if mom drops, do I just get the dental office? The other two siblings are like, well, why did you get the dental office?
Yeah, I think you want to, obviously that's where you get an attorney involved to just put together a plan. And I guess it doesn't have to be an attorney either. Just kind of actually have that discussion of how you're going to evaluate and value this asset of the dental practice. And if, there's a sweat equity piece and what that's valued at. If you built your mom's practice up for 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, if it's gone from $500,000 to 1.5 and you've participated in seeing that increase, well, you're due a piece of that. So you want to negotiate and see where.
Okay, and you're calling that sweat equity.
Yeah, I mean, sweat equity. There's also what has mom done for the 15 years prior to you coming on, and those patients that are now just switching over to you.
So he just nailed the beef. So you got out of school, mom's practice did $750. You went in there and started working with her, helping her expand the hours, and now 5 years later, it's not doing $750, it's doing 1.5. And then mom goes and values the practice. She says it's worth 1.5, and then you're like, well, mom, I built up half of that. Well, it's not in writing. You didn't say that. And so some good rules of thumb are this: when you get a job for the old man, because he's going to retire in 1 or 2 years, they never retire, because in 1 or 2 years they're like, oh, I need a new car. The wife wants to redo the backyard. I'm thinking of, so when they say, well, yeah, like I'm 57. If I told you, yeah, come work for me, I'll retire at 65. It just almost never happens. So just remember from Judge Wapner, if it's not in writing, it ain't. So you have all these stories and you're, nothing's in writing. Just get it in writing, get it in a contract, get it on paper. So what is your, so what do you like to do the most? You like to do transitions?
Yeah, I like that aspect of it.
So do dentists do old guys call you up and say, sell my practice?
Yeah, more or less. they'll call me up, or someone who they know, a banker or a CPA or an attorney or another broker will call me up and say, hey, this guy is talking about he wants to exit. And hopefully I get to speak with them prior to them making that, hey, I'm letting the staff know we're shutting the doors. Well, that's not a good exit strategy. It's a strategy. It's an exit strategy. It's not the one I would highly recommend, but it's good to get in there a year early, even longer if possible, just to really set that up and figure out what that succession plan and that exit strategy looks like. Because the last thing you want is to have a practice that's doing, I mean, just for easy, talking points, $1 million, and then that doc is working 5 days a week, slowly goes down to four, 3.5, and then the collections start dropping along with it. And have they brought into an associate to boost it up, or to continue that, at least stabilize those collections at top line? Sometimes they don't, so you see that drop off, and that's where you have a declining asset now. So you look at it from a standpoint of someone coming in and looking at my practice. Do they want to buy something that's declining, and then do they want to try and get their bank to finance a declining asset? Not so much. That makes it more difficult. So let's get in there. Let's talk about it. And I always put, if you're thinking about retiring, you're going to retire because you've already committed it in your mind. And when you think about something, you start thinking about it over and over again, it becomes reality. And so once you're having those thoughts, it's good to figure out a strategy. And it could be selling to your associate. It could be listing your practice and selling it to Dr. Johnson across the street, or Dr. Smith coming in from Texas, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I like getting in there. I like helping the doctors understand what they have. And with my financial background too, that's something that I can provide, is that I know what the value is going to look like. I know what it's going to go for in the marketplace. And I know the different routes that you can go with it. In the instance of selling to an associate, to a new doc, to rolling it into another group, to selling it to a corporate. I mean, all those items come into play nowadays, and I've navigated through them all in different scenarios. So I like doing that though, and it's fun, and it's fun getting in there and helping the doc, take that next step, and them enjoying the fruits of their labor and being able to retire and to go play golf, play softball, travel, whatever the case may be.
Smoke meat.
Yeah, mess around on their smoker, do a brisket, whatever you want to do. And then also it's fun to see the growth for the buyer and see that buyer come in. And it's really cool, which I'm working with right now, is that you have a seller who's selling to a dentist who actually went to that practice when he was a kid. So it's kind of cool dynamic that you see sometimes. And that's always it makes everybody kind of say, wait a second, I remember this practice, and I used to come to this practice. And so.
So on Dental Town, we've had free classifieds, and you can put them up for free. They expire after 9 days. So we have 4,700 classified ads. There's 1,859 practices for sale, 1,810 jobs available. What's neat about the practice for sale is a lot of people, like in Arizona, they'll list their practice in Arizona, but the guy that might want to buy it might be in the Navy stationed in Korea right now. But when they've been working for someone else for a year or two, and they decide they want to buy a practice, and they're looking at these 1,859 practices, and they say, I like this one over here. Should they respond to the ad? Should they go over there? Should they get a broker first? Is there pros and cons to them breaking the ice before they meet you? Or
Are you talking about a seller or a buyer?
A buyer.
A buyer? No, I mean, a buyer can just reach right out. I mean, I utilize the space right there. I utilize the platform that you provided. So I think it's great, and I think it provides a easier way for the buyers to find what's available in the marketplace. And at the same time, hopefully they've gotten there quick enough, and because practices are going fast now. It's a seller's market. You see that where multiple offers type of scenarios, or practices that go on the market for a short amount of time and then they're gone. So I caution buyers saying, hey, if this
why do you think it's a seller's market?
Because of the items we talked about earlier. It's just when you think about cyclical market, we're in one that's hasn't been seen before. We're a decade strong, and we haven't had a true hiccup. We haven't had that correction yet. And I hope it's not as big as the one we saw over 10 years ago now, but
We'll talk about that.
yeah.
Because they were
Well,
they were in grammar school when that happened.
Well, coming from a banking background, you learn that uh, they're cycles, they're cyclical. So typically every 5 to 7 years, you'll see some sort of correction, and the magnitude of it is what changes. And it could be, I mean, we saw what a little over a year ago, we saw a hiccup in the stock market, and everybody went bananas. But it didn't really change anything. So it was something that people said, "Whoa, what's going on here?" But we got right back on track the next week, and everything was fine and dandy. That typically doesn't happen, like you're saying. I mean, back in '08, we saw a tremendous crash.
Was
About
that the worst
2000.
one you saw in your life?
Oh yeah, for me,
How old were you in 1980?
1980, I was 2.
That
So
hurt.
no,
And,
I didn't feel that one.
I mean, I had 3 friends whose dads had lost the family
Sure.
farm, who walked in the barn and killed themselves. I mean, interest rates were 21%.
Yeah.
So these guys might have bought a John Deere tractor for $500,000 and it was at 6%. 2 years later, it was at 21%. I mean, it was floating interest rates. And you got to see immediately which one of your friends had negotiated a fixed interest rate debt and who was financing stuff floating 2 points over prime. And as prime floated from 6% to 21%, that sunk a lot of boats. So then was the last one, Lehman's, the worst one you'd ever seen?
Yeah.
And don't ask people if it'll happen again because no one knows the future. But what lessons did you learn from 2008 Lehman's Day? Because I noticed here in this valley, there were 2 major losses. It was the narrow focus, high-end cosmetic.
Sure.
And these were guys in my front room. I say, well, who would tell me, well, I can't do molar endo. I can't pull a wisdom tooth. So they had lost all their skill sets by spending a decade of just taking everything out and pressing and replacing it with Empress. It was just veneers, Empress, inlays, onlays, and they'd lost all their skill sets. And then the other end was the brand new buildup where they just knew you could just do this direct mail campaign once a month. And the direct mail in 2008, direct mail went to 0. You could mail every house in Phoenix an economic incentive to get your teeth cleaning, exam, and x-ray for $49, and no one would call. So elective dentistry comes to an end, and dentistry went from elective, oh yeah, I'm just here for my routine cleaning, whatever, to just pain and emergency, for a little while. But what were your lessons from Lehman's?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of that you see that the elective pieces and the straight cosmetic need doesn't get done. You don't get the $40,000 all-on-4s done at the whim, So those practices are going to be the ones that I would assume would get hit the hardest in another downturn.
The all-on-4s, 25,000 an arch.
Yeah.
That would be the Lehman's Day. Again, you're up in Scottsdale. I mean, I had guys that just all they would do is just rich women would come in. They'd take everything out of that was old in their mouth and replace it with Empress glass bonded in and make these $1 million movie smiles. And it just stopped.
Yeah.
At Lehman's Day. And so you're right. I think the all-on-4 will just and it's not forever. I mean, we lived through this 4 times. People make such a big deal out of when is the end. It's like, well, when you live through it 4 years, it's just a transition, and it's usually pretty short.
Yeah,
it's usually 8. How long do you think Lehman's was a?
I mean,
how long did that put resistance in your dental market?
I think that had a lot longer. Obviously, my experience wasn't much more than that.
But how long?
I think from my perspective was different because my perspective was a credit one, where you were feeling the aftermath of it because the decisions that had to be made during that downturn were still affecting buyers and sellers 5 and 7 years down the road. So I think the true hit might have been just a 2-3 year period, but the true aftermath of it carried on because of the decisions that had to be made. And a lot of times it was doctors deciding between selling their selling and holding on to their businesses or their homes, and those credit decisions then influence their ability to retain, gain credit, and such down the road. So,
And the dentists in this very town that I knew that were most affected were the ones that were doing these limited partnerships. So they, they were a specialist. There were 3 or 4 of them. They all love each other. They golf each other. They vacation together. So 4 of them decide they're going to go in on some duplex or something. And then one of them fails. Well, as soon as one of them fails, then the other 3 partners, you're going to belly up more cash where there's no liquidity in the market. And I know one guy who he went in on a partnership up in Flagstaff, 4 dentists, and the other 3 bailed out. So he had to do a bankruptcy.
sure.
So it's a limited partnership. It's like, really? So you found 4 other people to do this project that you don't know anything about? I mean, how do you go from being an endodontist to a condominium real estate developer with 4 partners? I mean, any part of this story sounds insane, and it's amazing. It's like, okay, so you're an endodontist. You had 12 years, 10 years of college, and your best idea was to take all your money, go into something you know nothing about, with 3 other partners.
That probably didn't know anything either.
Yeah. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what Warren Buffett says when the stock market, when the credit contracts and the tide goes back out to sea, you get to see who's swimming without any trunks on.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. I guess that makes sense kind of with where we're at. We'll see what happens too with that in regards to the corporate groups too. See which ones of those are truly successful and which ones.
So Arizona is ground zero for DSOs. 18% of the dentists in Arizona are affiliated with a DSO.
Sure.
There's 5 states. It's not even 1%.
Yeah.
So this is by far the biggest. In fact, I think the second biggest state is only 12%.
That Florida, maybe?
It's because you can come in here you get licensed by credential. If you got a license from Oklahoma, they'll take it here.
Sure.
So it's probably really good for the DSO market.
Mm-hmm.
Probably really good for the insurance companies and the patient. But is it not so good for the dentist here in Arizona?
I think it obviously provides or creates a serious challenge, but at the same time too, I think in my experience with the dentists there's still many, many good, successful dentists out there in the marketplace that they might be feeling a little bit of crunch from the DSOs, but at the same time, a lot of that DSO market is the, $49 Groupon. It's not necessarily the patient that you're going to see again and again and again, which sometimes based on the type of clinical practice you have, you don't want those patients. You don't want the one-time $49 show up and never show up again. So you want the ones that are going to be there long-term for you. So I think that obviously it's getting tighter just because of the marketing piece and because of the cost and the fact that it's difficult to compete with a DSO because you're dealing with someone who has an individual sitting in every seat, whereas as a single doc owner, you're sitting in all those seats. You're wearing the marketing hat. You're wearing the accounting hat. You're wearing the team leader hat. You're wearing all these and not able to just say, okay, Billy, Johnny, Sally, whatever your name is, you're handling this portion of the business. So I think that's where the creative magic can be successful or difficult is how good the team is. Once again, going back to kind of that team concept of your office. If you have the people in place that can do that or that are cross-trained to do different jobs, I think that's going to help you out quite a bit. And then when you compare that with a DSO where they have somebody sitting in an office in whatever, Charlotte or New York or wherever their home office is, Ohio, wherever it might be, and they're paid their whatever salary to just focus on that. I think that's where the difference is you have someone who's focusing just on one vertical of the business versus the single doc who's wearing different hats. And they're not going to school to wear different hats.
I'm on the practice transition thread, and a recurring theme is how do I evaluate this practice? So, George says it's worth 750,000, and he's got these metrics, and here's a 25-year-old kid. He's been out of school 2 years. How am I a 25-year-old kid? You're the broker saying it's worth 750. How do I know if that's all
I
good
mean,
and true?
you have to look at the financials. You have to look at the production, the collection reports. You also have to go in there and see what procedures that seller is doing and the clinical philosophy of that seller. I know that's not a financial question, but it's one that should be in your mind if you have that same clinical philosophy as the seller, or ways that there can be overlap, or ways that you can add to it. But the financials are pretty clear cut when you look at it from a P&Ls, production reports, collection reports. You look at the procedure reports, you look at the tax returns, you look at all these items that are provided to you in a prospectus that I put together or whoever puts together, and you review them. Obviously, they're going to have to be vetted by your banker if you're getting financing. Um, and also, I mean, there's individuals that can help you out. You probably have a CPA who's going to look at them. Um, so, I mean, there's definitely individuals out there to help you navigate that. And good brokers, or like myself, are going to put together a prospectus that's going to give you a pretty deep, dive into the financials and how we came up with that valuation, be it a, collection percentage, be it a basis of a multiple of EBITDA, be it a, however you want to use the valuation. It's a net income piece. There's multiple ways you can do it, but that's all going to be spelled out for you in the prospectus typically, or it's going to be provided to you in the financials for you to go through and just really verify the information that we found, and then, just
What he said, it might have wished over your head. And I was thinking of several of these cases where somebody goes in and this guy play 20% of his income's from placing implants, and the guy behind the practice doesn't even place implants, and so it's doing $1.5 million. Once you back out all those implant cases, you're buying an office that's worth $1.5 million, and you can only go in there and do $1 million. And so what you're looking for is the opposite of that. The gold mines I've seen is you find a practice, and this old man referred out all of his molar endo, but you do molar endo. So now you're looking at the procedures, and he's saying, well, this office has $750,000. And you're like, yeah, but he referred out $100,000 a year in molar endo. Maybe he didn't like pediatric dentistry. Maybe so. So you need to make sure that if you're going to purchase, patient flow equals cash flow. So what he just said to you, if this doctor did all this types of dentistry on these patients, that's what's for sale, and you can do that. Where you can only get this office for half off is looking at what he didn't do and referred out. Maybe he didn't do any Invisalign, he didn't do any molar endo, he didn't do anything. And the gold mine, and a lot of times the guys will look at a practice, say, I don't even want to get something that small. I mean, it's an office. It only does $500,000 a year. I'm looking for something bigger. Sure. I'm married. I got kids. I want something bigger. Yet this old man was doing $500,000 a year because all he did was MOD amalgams and patch things. I know a guy in Palm Springs, same time I was coming out, he bought some old man's office in Palm Springs who basically just did MOD amalgams and patched everything. He never did anything but showed up to work. On average, about 4 of his patients would come in, and one of his MOD-BL amalgams fell apart, and he would just numb them up and do a crown. So he was doing 4 $1,000 a day crowns for the whole 25 years he had that thing. So that guy doing all those MOD amalgams was like planting trees, and he just came in 25 years later and harvested all of these trees. But make sure you're not buying something that you can't do. And you might look at the young and green might look and say, well, I can do all those procedures. Oh, yeah. But you can't case presentate. You can't sell. So this guy could present $25,000 treatment plans and people would buy. And you're like, well, I know how to place it. I went to an implant course. Yeah, you might be able to place an implant. China's making robots that can place an implant. But I don't think China's making a robot that can sell a $25,000 all-on 4 case to a human.
Yeah, I mean, I think also you can also then see that as a potential for learning from that individual who might be placing those implants as being someone who can help you with your hand speed and all the how you can learn these tactics and learn the implant the way of doing things. So I think there's flip side to everything, and so maybe he's doing 20% of it, but you're going to come in and learn from him, and he's going to show you that, or you're going to set it up where he just comes in on a every couple Fridays, and that's all he does is the implants for you. He does it at a heavy discount, and you learn from him that way.
So I'm going to ask you a question though, but you're incentivized to be biased.
Sure.
So back in the day, when I got out of school, if I bought a practice, the owner carried. When you go back to Kansas, he says the interest rate was always 10% because that they could do the math.
Makes it easy.
It made the math easy, and the owner could carry. Now owners aren't carrying. Third parties are carrying. And what I liked about the owner carry is I was, if I had 2 guys coming in to buy, and I thought, nah, you can't pull this off, but you can. I would make sure the guy could pull it off. Number 2, if he's making me a payment once a month for the next 7 years, and he gets an upset patient, it's my best interest to get in there and fix this and whatever. And now I see that human touch element's gone, and now it's some big bank. It's Wells Fargo or where did you used to work?
I used to work at Wells, then at Arizona Business Bank. And
so now it's some big bank. Do you think it was better back in the day having an owner carry? Do you ever do where Wells Fargo carries half and the owner carries the other half?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's there's some scenarios where that's based on financials or based on the trends of the financials, where the bank or the third party, the lender, whoever it may be, will say, no, we're comfortable with this, but we're not comfortable with this. And so if the seller wants that individual, they're going to find a way to make that work. Seller carries are still common. I wouldn't say they're as common, but they happen. And it's just different scenarios where, like you're saying, you can choose to bet on the horse with a seller carryback. You choose, because obviously you're the one who's the bank. You're taking on the risk that the lender would be taking on. So you can choose whomever you want in that scenario. It doesn't provide risk, sure, because you're betting on a horse. You're hoping that this buyer is going to be able to replicate what you did, continue that goodwill, and that longevity is going to continue there. So it's happening still. It's happening in different scenarios, not as frequent by any means. And I think it's just really based on the scenario and the situation.
I want you to address the other $1 million question. Rural, urban. What's the pros and cons of going to urban, rural?
Well, I mean, you're going to look at amount of patients surrounding you. But at the same time, amount of competition surrounding you. Obviously, Scottsdale is a great example of throwing a rock and hitting 5 dentists. There's a lot of dentists per capita there. And then rural, it's going to be, you're going to have less patients, but you're going to have more room for growth. And you're going to be, there's a lot of different benefits to it. It might give you the ability of that kind of hometown feel where you're involved in the community. You're at there's one school, everybody goes to it. You're the town dentist, and that kind of old Americana, if you will, feeling of small town USA. There's going to be less probably rapid growth, but there might be that opportunity, like you're saying, for the standalone real estate to be purchased, because there isn't a retail strip center that you're working out of. I think it's really going to be based on what you're looking for and what you're looking for your family, what you're looking for the growth of your practice, and really what you want. So I think there's pros and cons to both. It's really just what you're looking for in your practice search and what you want for, that 10-year, 20-year, 30-year period.
I've been noticing a lot of people, when they're doing the due diligence, find a lot of illegal stuff, mainly seller not collecting copays, which is absolutely illegal. And but it's tough because dentists get weak and they're like, well, the insurance pay for 80%. I'll do it, but can you give me the 20% discount and not collect the copay? And dentists are just shy. And so you have to learn. Everybody made fun of Nancy Reagan back in the day because her whole policy towards a big multivariate complex drug thing was just say no. And so you need to learn verbiage so it comes out of reflex. And what I always said is, well, obviously you wouldn't want me to risk my license. I mean, it took me 8 years to become a dentist. And everyone's like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. Well, actually, you did just mean that. You wanted me to do insurance fraud. So you need to practice with your friend, with your mom. Hey, can you, instead of, they're only going to pay half a crown, can you bill for 2 crowns? They'll pay half of each and then we'll be good. Well, obviously you don't want me to lose my dental license. I mean, it took me 8 years to get that license. I'm not going to risk it for your free crown. Sure. But there's 2 threads there. Buying practice does not collect copays. The next one down, not charging copay. What do you do? And what's tough about that is when you buy an office, let's say the dentist always said, come in, we'll do the dentistry, we'll bill your insurance, we'll see what they pay, whatever they don't pay, we'll send you a bill. Okay, so now you're not getting your money for 30, 60, 90 days. And then you buy the practice, you say, no, your half is due at the time of services. And no, we don't do insurance fraud. So there's a lot of things looking in there. Another emotional thing is this guy wants to sell his practice, but he won't sign a non-compete clause. It's like, okay, I'm buying your practice, but you could literally just go down the hall.
Yeah, typically within that ICA or the independent contractor agreement, because there's usually some, time frame of that true transition, be it a 3-month, a 6-month, a year, whatever the case may be. And within that ICA, the independent contractor agreement, there's going to be that non-compete piece as well, where they're not going to open up an office or work in an office for within 5 miles or 10 miles for the next 5 years. Whatever the case may be, that's going to be put in there. So
what is your advice on how long the transition period could be? That's another big variable. Some want to sell and run. Some want to.
I think it really depends on and I think it differs from a GP practice to a specialty practice as well too, because within a specialty practice it's going to be different because you're really basing it on your referral sources, and so you're going to want that, or the individual's buying, it's going to want you to hand walk you into these other practices and the referral sources and make sure that that feeling is there, because if they don't do that, there's a good chance they're just not going to refer anymore. So you want that in a specialty practice's transition for sure. And in a GP, I think I always recommend it, if we can do it, that we have some sort of transition period, just because
so how long did you want the specialist transition period to be? How long does it take them to take me to all the study clubs?
The last couple we've done have been about 6 to 12 months.
6 to 12 months?
Yeah. Just because that gives you the time to get out, and really depending on and that's always a tricky question too, is how you let it be known to the staff, how you work through that, and those are all the things that we talk about and I have experience doing. So I provide different kind of ways that we can discuss it and go through that.
It's the same thing you do during divorce. You just sit your kids down and say, you are the reason mommy and daddy are getting a divorce. You were bad children.
They're all different, and there's a science to it. And it's really how, and there's different scenarios too. If there is a health or an illness issue too, then obviously that's going to dictate kind of the timing of it as well. But yeah, I always recommend it.
My biggest, there's a couple of things that really blow my mind. One is if you ask any person with a PhD in economics, because I got my MBA at ASU. So you go to any of those guys that have a PhD down there and you say, well, what made America great? You go, well, it was 500 years of immigration, and when people vote with their feet, they got skin in the game, they moved over here to do something, and you're like, yeah. So you want to open up Ellis Island? Oh, no, I don't want to. I want to build a wall. And you're like, okay, that's really, really weird. And you look at Wall Street, and the whole thing is built on mergers and acquisitions. And whenever I find a dental office collecting $4 or $5 million a year, he went to some town, and every 5 years when the old guy retired, he'd just buy his office, roll it in. So think about that. So say you go into a town, just for simple math, it's 10,000 people and there's 10 dentists. And every time the old guy sells, do you want the old 65-year-old to sell it to a young 25-year-old who's ready to hustle? Or would you rather say, oh, there's 10 offices, I'll buy that. Now there's only 9. 5 years later, oh, I'll buy that old guy. Now there's only 8. And then by the time he's the old guy, he's doing $4 million a year.
Sure.
And you just don't see M&A activity in dentistry. I mean, Wall Street is just, I mean, it's all M&A. So why does Wall Street do M&A activity? In fact, some of the most successful gauges in the market is how much M&A activity is going on.
Sure.
So why is it, are you seeing more in dentistry than 10 years ago?
I mean, we see it from the corporate side for sure.
Just
I mean,
the DSO.
Yeah. I mean, but you do see it. There are some individuals that I'm sure you know in the Valley that have 10, 12 practices. And so that is an indication of, obviously, if you're getting to that point, I would assume and hope that you're very successful in what you're doing, because that's a lot of practices to manage, and you're overseeing a number of practitioners, and you're overseeing a number of associates, depending on how you structure it, if they're partners or if they're just associates. But you see it in certain smaller groups where they have 4, 6, 8, 12 practices, but you see it predominantly in the DSO. And then, like you're saying, the doctors who, hey, I'm looking for a practice within 5 miles of mine that's doing 250 to 500,000. The doc's not doing A, B, C, D procedures. And as long as they're within a certain radius of my office, I'm going to roll them in. I'm going to buy the charts. The doc can come over and work for 3 months, 4 months if he wants, and then kind of head off into the sunset. So you see that, and that roll in, that's happening quite a bit. And then in the DSO space, it's mergers and acquisitions. There's a few DSOs that just do de novos, but.
And who are those?
Aspen's the biggest one that I can think of just at the top of my head that really only focuses on de novos. Heartland does acquisitions, some of the other, and you've seen some that came in, Dental One and some of those that have done some acquisitions, now doing some partnerships, and some of them offer that space.
Pacific Dental, where they
PDS does. I don't think PDS does too many acquisitions anymore. They mainly do a lot of de novos, it seems. I don't really know them too well as far as in my day-to-day space. I know what they focus on, and they have that same kind of I guess appetite that they're looking for, that all the large DSOs are looking for, as far as their data and their dynamics and what they want as far as an acquisition.
Well, tell them what that is, because a lot of the old people listening to this, if they're wondering if a DSO is part of their liquidity options, they have to be a certain. What do they really have to be to get the attention of a DSO?
That sweet spot for a DSO is usually about 1.5 million, 2 docs, 6+ ops. That's really what they want to see from the start, and they can kind of work with the rest. I've seen DSOs take on acquisitions and roll-ins, $500,000, 750 at times. So, it really just depends, and that's where having a good transition broker can really show you your options.
So, are you selling DSOs many offices? Or?
No. I mean, one and
or
two.
Do they have their own teams? So
they have their own teams, yeah. So they're out peppering the marketplace with flyers and stuff, and there's local groups that are trying to do it too. But if that's your ultimate strategy, then that's something we can talk about, and I'll have the discussion with all of my sellers of what their options are. And some of them will say, heck no, I don't even want to talk about that. I don't want anything to do with those. Some will say, well, what's it look like from a perspective of exit strategy and timing and money? All those items come into play. So it's kind of just something that I'll go over all your options and say, here's what I think is possible for you in the marketplace. Let's talk about them, figure out what's right for you.
But how much does it cost to call and talk to you?
Call and talk to me. It's whatever your cell phone bill is going to cost you per month because it doesn't cost you anything. Just give me a call.
Okay, how do they contact you? It's Karl Frye, so they call.
480-599-69.
You're the drummer of the Eagles, or were you the lead guitar? Or that's Glenn Frye.
Yeah, close. No.
So Karl
I did sing in a
Frye,
band once.
Frye, and then how do they contact you?
480-599-6958.
480-599-6958. Man, that's a lot of nines. That is 3 9s, 2 8s. So 480-599-6958. What about email?
Karl at frypracticesales.com. So that's Karl with a K, Karl at Fry.
And if they go to frypracticesales.com, what are they going to find on that website?
Information about me, about the company, a way to kind of talk to us about listings, a way to talk to us about listing your practice. And really, you're just going to get me. You're going to get my knowledge, get the ability just to, hear me out, hear what I think is the opportunity for you in the marketplace, and discuss what your time frame is, and we'll discuss it all and figure out if working together is a good strategy, and if it's now or in 5 years or whatever the case may be. I mean, I'm open.
The coolest thing about your entire website is the tooth logo. That is really cool.
Like that?
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one cool deal. So it's either buy a practice, practice expansion, growth plans. We streamline the selection of practices in the current market to find only the best in value and help you find a perfect practice. Or you're selling your practice. We specialize in adding value to our clients' practices. Let our team of experts help find the most qualified buyers for your practice. And are you, do more people call you wanting to sell or to buy?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of buyers in the marketplace. So buyers are constantly contacting me through many different avenues. And then obviously we're looking at who's a good fit for our sellers, and hoping to align them and help that transition occur.
Karl, it's you came here at the end of the day. Now you got to go back through the evening traffic. It was an honor that you came down here today to talk to my homies about all things.
Thanks for having me.
Buying and selling a practice. It's Karl Frye, Frye. His email's Karl at frypracticesales.com, or call him on his cell phone, 480-599-6958. Karl, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much.